This reading is from Rays of the One Light, Parallel Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading is To Each According to His Faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John in the Bible, we read, "Everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God." It is a common experience shared by most people that when a person errs, he experiences a desire to hide that error from his conscience instead of holding it up for purification. Error clutches its misdeeds to itself and resists correction, though it is only in the state of purity that we can achieve perfect freedom. It requires an act of will to offer that awareness up to the light and to hold it there until one's inner darkness is completely dissipated. For every state of every state of consciousness has its own attractive power. The more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences natural to it. Our faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. Goodness attracts goodness. It takes goodness even to see goodness. Evil attracts evil, and it takes evil even to see evil, that is, to take special note of its existence. Whatever there is in you of darkness or light, offer it up to the heights. In the supreme light alone will we find salvation. Accept nothing less in yourself as your lasting reality. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 12th chapter, "Cling thou to me, clasp me with heart and mind, so shalt thou dwell surely with me on high. But if thy thought droops from such height, if thou beest weak to set body and soul upon me constantly, despair not. Give me lower service. Seek to reach me, worshipping with steadfast will. And if thou canst not worship steadfastly, work for me. Toil in works pleasing to me. For he that laboreth right for love of me shall finally attain. But if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. Good morning again. This reading gives us a very important teaching on a practical level on how to guide our lives. Because as Swamiji points out, and as the scriptural commentaries point out, that that same state of consciousness attracts to itself its same state of consciousness. It's not that opposites attract in this case. It's that similar things attract more similar things. Another way to think of it is momentum, that an object in motion upward tends to stay in motion. More things help it to move upward, and the reverse is also true. And we may have seen this in our own lives. It's a safe bet that we've all seen it. That if we fall into a mood of unhappiness, that we tend to go further in that unhappiness before we come out of it. Somebody says, "Oh, come on, think of it this way, that maybe you lost this, but somebody else gained that." "Yeah, sure they did, because I always lose, and everyone else always gains." And so it goes on, that I had this experience where a friend of mine was trying to give me positive suggestions, and I was almost upset with him for trying to disturb my unhappiness. I was happy in my unhappiness, you might say. Finally, he threw up his hands in exasperation and said, "I'm only trying to help." And I've always remembered that, because I was sorry that I had driven him to that frustration. I was sorry later. I couldn't see it at the time. I was just too contracted, too small, too upset, and attached to being that way, unwilling, as it says, to open up. And similarly, if we're in a good state of mind, especially if it's grounded in calmness, if it's grounded in meditation, that we've been working on our subconscious through meditation, and reaching up to our superconsciousness through meditation, that if we're in a positive mood, we tend to stay in a positive mood. That something bad happens that might normally upset us, and we say, "Oh, it's okay. What does it matter? It's fine." And somebody even comes up to us in an aggressive or upsetting way, and instead we just feel compassion for them. When Swamiji received a threatening letter from somebody, even actually threatening a lawsuit, he said, I couldn't help it. My first reaction was to feel kindly towards the person. I don't know why. I don't know why he felt that way, and he didn't explain, but he did say that was my first reaction. Not intentional. That was the reaction that came up naturally. And in fact, he said sometimes, how can we do the reverse? How can we find a way to move ourselves instantly out of a negative mood? In other words, not allow ourselves to go down, but if it comes up in our minds, then to find a way to work through it. You can't always just deny its existence. That if that leads to just suppression, then it's not helpful, because that we actually do feel upset. No, I don't feel upset though, because I am a yogi. And yogis do not feel upset, and therefore I do not feel upset. You can't fake it. If we just bottle it up or suppress it, as Swamiji says, it comes out in some weird way later on, because it's in there. We're not being truthful. It doesn't mean, on the other hand, that in the name of truth we should embrace royally every hysterical mood or emotion that we have. So a middle ground is needed. But if we feel this way, upset, for example, it's important to acknowledge, yes, I am upset. Maybe I can't do anything about it right now because we're in a emergency situation, or maybe I need to be alone in order to reflect a little bit, introspect, swadhyaya, to see what is it that upset me, or why did I react with upset. But anyway, still, when something comes up, and how can we find a way to either dodge the attack, or even if we get hit, to at least try to make something of it. Anyway, that's a long introduction to Swamiji's statement that he said, if somebody is thinking badly of you, don't worry about it. You might say, well, how nice of them to think of me at all. And so I've often thought of that and laughed in different times in my life, and I was connecting that to maybe he thought that when receiving this letter threatening a lawsuit. Well, nice of them to write. Thank you for your letter dated April 16th or whatever it was. So anyway, that also comes from great inner strength and great courage. It wasn't that Swamiji was saying, la, 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 well, it's fine, a lawsuit here, a lawsuit there, in an airy-fairy way. He was saying it with great strength. And in fact, the people did sue, and it went on and on and on until they finally lost. But still, it took great strength on his part to be able to, from strength, have that attitude. At the same time, we shouldn't wait for such strength, or to say, well, he could do it because he's a Maha Yogi and so strong. That's how we develop strength. There's a line by Shakespeare that I can't remember the exact words, but basically it says, pretend a virtue though you have it not. Meaning we should act strong, even if we don't feel strong. Why? Because as the scripture reading said, that if we are of the light, then we move more towards the light. To put it this way, if we want the light, If we move more towards the light, that light fills us, strengthens us, helps manifest those things we're doing because we're putting ourselves in alignment with the light, in harmony with the light, in attunement with the light. That's why the song that we sang was perfect. What we need is light was the thing we kept singing over and over again. And in fact, in the earlier versions of the song, we would all clap that what we need is light, and clap like that. So it wasn't in the recording that we played, so I didn't insert it there, but it can be fun to just emphasize, I live for the light. As the line in that song says, if we want to see the sunrise, let us turn and face the dawn. And another song of Swamiji's, Come Gather Round, he says, lift up your head, greet the rising sun. That the sun is there and it's rising, and all we have to do is just lift up our heads. Just even if you have to use both hands just to say, like a flower. Flowers do at night. You know, the flowers turn and they follow the sun, some of them in plants, and then I don't know if at night they come back, or in any case you can see them lifting up their heads to catch as much of that life-giving light, that loving light that they can. You might say, well, sometimes the light from the sun is not all that loving, it feels sometimes in Chennai, and I agree. Master referred to it as the ungentle Indian sun. So yes, there is that aspect of it. But still, we would rather have the light than no light. And so it's so important to emphasize the light in ourselves, in others, and in life. Because as we think, Swamiji has said, so we become. So in the way that we think, if we tend to think in a positive way, it builds again that momentum to continue on in a positive way. And so the reverse is true. Obviously, that one we know. Some of us, or at some periods of our life, we have been experts at that. I can say for myself. So moving away from that. So what can we do when seized by a negative mood, by finding ourselves? I mean, sometimes we can have an instant experience, a hit of some kind that then makes us upset. We react with upset. You know, it's something interesting that Dharmini had said some time ago that I hadn't really thought of in that way before. She said that every reaction that we have to anything is from the past. And I had to think about that a little bit and meditate on it, and I think it's very true that anytime we have a reaction to something, it's from past experience. Now, you can say, well, if I burn my hand on a stove, then isn't that present experience? And okay, maybe there's a certain allowance for that, but if you've ever been hurt by something for the very first time, something you didn't expect to hurt you, like you move your hand on a carrot and somehow a part of the carrot gets under your fingernails and it hurts, but you're also partly surprised, just like, a carrot? Really? Should I watch out for the Vengayam and the Takali also? Are they coming after me? Just that I didn't expect a carrot to turn against me. There's a little bit of surprise also. Whereas if you're constantly cutting yourself on carrots, in which case I would wonder, maybe there's room for some cooking lessons or something, but that we just, anytime someone brings out the carrots, we say, get it away. It hasn't even hurt us yet, but we have that past memory, and therefore it gives us that reaction. As the phrase goes, once bitten, twice shy. And it's something that has happened very often in our lives. We see that even something that isn't going to hurt us, because it did once, or it reminds us of something that hurt us, we have that fear come up almost instinctively, naturally, even uncontrollably. Naturally meaning it's not natural, but it comes up of our own nature, which is to say our past hurt, our memory to that hurt. It is a natural, in the sense of being common reaction, not one we should be frustrated with, but one we should understand and not allow it to run us, not to have our memories, our attachments to that pain. As Master said, to be hurt once is one thing, but then to relive that hurt memory day after day is to, someone may have hurt us once, but then we hurt ourselves every day after that. And so to solve this is not necessarily achieved by mental effort alone, or even at all. Doing meditation, offering these things up in Kriya, mixing with positive people who encourage us, chanting, all of these things, again, positive things, try to wash out that darkness, or to put it another way, to heal that pain and help us to release that memory by putting in so many positive memories, say, rather than focusing on that and trying to get rid of it. You can't drive out the darkness with a stick, as the song said. As Master said, he said, darkness can remain in a room. Well, I'm mixing up his sayings. One thing is, he said, you can't drive out darkness by beating at it with a stick. You have to turn on the light. And in another saying, he said that a room can remain in darkness for 100 years. And all you have to do is just simply turn the light on, and it will vanish as though, the darkness will vanish as though it had never been. And so, for us too, to remember, again, dealing with ourselves, dealing with a situation, dealing with others, to find ways to bring light into it. First and foremost, and perhaps only, just focus on bringing light into ourselves, as opposed to bringing light into the other person, or even into the situation. Sometimes that can be effective if we are doing it gently, without attachment to the results. All praying that God bless the person in whatever way will be best for them, rather than saying, bless him, not that way, and make him stop. That did work, though, for one devotee. She was a disciple of Master. She had a husband who was always criticizing her spiritual path, her guru, everything. And so she was driving a car with her husband in the car with her, and he was launching into this. And I think once he started criticizing Master, in her mind, she just said, Master, make him stop. And the man suddenly fell silent and didn't say another word for the rest of the journey. He spoke again later, I'm sure. It wasn't permanent, but it was amazing how instant that was. You'll often find that if people are very critical of something spiritual, it's mostly because they're threatened by it. They're afraid of it. And if you bring them near the light, as it even says in the scripture, they tend to draw away. There was... you see it often that people talk big talk, but then when they're face to face with that light, they either shrink or they melt. And so I was surprised in this. Someone who spoke to me very strongly against my spiritual path, when he met someone completely unwillingly who was a representative of this path, he backed away and basically fled the scene. And I was surprised, because he had been so, bravely shouting when it was just the two of us. But then when somebody else was introduced, he ran. It is often that way. So another thing, though, is that sometimes there is maybe not just a fear, but there's also just a hurt that then in the face of that light, that darkness melts. There was a man who had been a part of Ananda or visited Ananda in the early years, and then he left and he lived nearby. And he was speaking against Swami Kriyananda, and Swami Kriyananda heard that this man had been saying, one of these days I'm going to go up there to Ananda and give Kriyananda a piece of my mind. And so one day when Swamiji came into the Sunday satsang like this, when he was entering from the back and walking in, he saw that this man was there in the audience. And so Swamiji walked right over to him and greeted him, and hello, Bill, or whatever his name was. Swamiji said, and then I stood there because if he really wanted to give me a piece of his mind, I wanted to give him a chance to get it off his chest. So he stood there expectantly, And the man just hugged him. The man couldn't do anything else because he could feel that love coming from Swamiji. And again, in that face to face, you find that people often do act differently than what they say. So, in the same, it can be helpful for us. If we are upset with somebody, it can be very helpful to try to talk to them face to face rather than on the phone, and certainly rather than through any textual means, be it email, SMS, WhatsApp, anything. Because when we have those kinds of conversations, not even a phone call, but anything lower down, we are having the conversation with ourselves. You see? The first line of saying, I was really hurt by what you did, and the person would have said, if they had a chance, I'm so sorry. And I agree, I shouldn't have done it, but instead, the 5 pages that follow say, by then you've completely ruined the whole thing. And if you don't believe it, just imagine yourself on the other side of it. And then the receiving end. And so to at least have a phone call. I was struck by something Swamiji said once. He said, I don't like talking to people on the phone. I would much rather drive across town to be able to sit with a person face to face than talk on the phone. And for us now, talking on the phone is this big exotic effort because we can so easily just just, send a one-liner. And whereas I actually, went through the process of making a phone call, I was going to say, or even I got dressed and made a Zoom call face to face. That's all we can do right now. That's the highest during this time period. But still, better that, partly because, again, if we're the one who's hurt or upset, seeing the person's face, it may soften us. We may remember, this bothers me, but seeing, I don't want to just ruin your day. And plus, if we are too rough, we see the impact on that person's face, which is helpful, and we don't get that on the phone. But also, it helps us to remember, I've known you now for 15 years or whatever it is, and we've had a lot of experiences together, and this is only one, and so keep that in mind too if it helps. Another thing to remember then is that we always want to emphasize the positive in ourselves. Suppose we have a really bad habit, for example. Well, one way would be, for example, to if we have a tendency to want to take things from others, I assume you can leave their money and jewelry well enough alone, but that we, might want to take a little credit, even for something we didn't do, or at least to have it known that we had an equal share as much as she did in what was accomplished. All of this, if we have that and we feel the pettiness of it. You see, it could be that if we're severely hurt and we always sit quietly and wounded in the corner, it actually would be a step forward in growth for us to say, hey, I did that too, because that directionally is a higher place. You can't jump suddenly from going, that's okay, I know no one cares, to say, I am so spiritual that it doesn't matter to me. That's faking it. We call it a spiritual bypass, where basically something that is tamasic in some ways also looks sattvic. You see, no, I don't need that, versus, no, it's all right, I don't need that. There are two different ways that of essentially the same statement, but one is coming from tamoguna, which is to say hurt and smallness. I'm not judging it as evil or anything. We all have different things to heal. But then you can't leap from tamoguna to sattvaguna. You have to go through rajoguna in the middle. So even if it involves doing things that in other people would appear a bit egotistical, it's better to assert your ego in that way because it represents your next step forward, in this area at least. And so in any case, if we have that bad habit, though, we've become experts at always claiming our share of the credit, and no one is ever confused or in the dark as to whether we had contributed, because we're always inserting ourselves. And we recognize this as it feels petty to me. I feel small. My heart feels pinched when I do this. I might have a big smile, but later I kind of feel kind of almost unclean. That, I'm why did I do that? But I still will do it. So if we want to let that go, rather than focusing on that habit, oh, it's so terrible, oh, I'm so bad, oh, I did it again, and all these things, Swamiji says, put positive energy out in the opposite direction. Try to give more then. In other words, we may not be able to even give credit to other people because we may still be caught up in that. But we may be able to give other things. We may, like even in our home, say, let me cook for you, or let me give you this thing, or I did this household chore during COVID quarantine. There's not a lot we can do, but it all kind of relates to the house. But let me give, in this way to you. It may not be the way that we have the problem with, but in another way. Give, rather to balance out the karma of all this taking. It's not a very strong example because I don't know how many of us have that specific problem, but hopefully you get the idea that even broadly, suppose we have our energy goes down in one direction and we fight against it and still it just keeps on going. Instead, rather than blame ourselves every time it happens, first of all to say, as Swamiji recommends, I haven't yet succeeded. That's how he overcame smoking. Every time he went back by force of habit, he said, I haven't yet succeeded, rather than I failed. And so, say that. Also remember Master's words, I don't ask that you overcome temptation. I ask that you resist it. So at least resist. At least even say, Master, I don't want to be doing this, or I don't want to do what I just did. If we find ourselves reacting with upset words when we really would like to have remained calmer, but we couldn't help it, we couldn't stop it, to say, I don't want to be that way, rather than I'm so terrible and all those things. But also, put more energy in the positive direction. Just find positive things to do. Be extra kind when you can. Be cheerful. Sing Swamiji's songs. Again, meditate. Find ways to be secretly kind to people in a way they won't even know. But to be one of, at one point at Ananda, we were talking about being a secret agent for Divine Mother. To, go and do a little something that no one will ever know about. I mean, that you were the one who did it. And so in this way, you put as much in the positive side of the scale to outweigh the negative, which I guess this is outweigh, but then it seems like it goes up. Anyway, you get the idea, to overshadow, to bowl over the negative side. Often that's a much better way of dealing with a bad habit than just by focusing on it, partly because we just can end up feeling so defeated. And so instead, focus on all the other things you can easily put positive energy into. And over time, that will shift the balance in your favor and even pull along this darkness or this negative thing that you don't want into the light. So keep this in mind, and also keep this, even though I read patience and it was wrong for this week, willingness is what's needed. That was the one for this week, the affirmation. Let us be patient with others. We belong to no one, and no one belongs to us. And so Divine Mother brings us together for a time, but she's the mother, and we are the children. We are all equally the children. And so let us, if we feel too responsible for somebody else's behavior, not that we caused it, but it's up to us to fix it or to be upset about it, just offer it to Divine Mother and say, this person, you're working with them in your own way. That happened with Swamiji. He was working with somebody who was causing a great deal of difficulty, or at least, for others. A lot of people were hurt by this person and the way the person was behaving and so on. And At one point, he asked some people, "What do you think about that sort of area of the work?" And as soon as they started to say, "Well, Swamiji, this person," he said, "I don't want to hear it. I'm working with him in my own way, and I don't want to hear another word." And it did turn out, unfortunately, that it didn't work out for that person. But I think Swamiji was, as long as possible, as much as possible, even if it were causing some discomfort to others, because after all, that was a way for them to grow. It wasn't criminal, it wasn't egregious, but it was not comfortable for them. But he didn't want to risk losing this person, which unfortunately is what happened. But Swamiji tried. And again, I shouldn't say I know. Maybe after the person left, they still had some kind of harmonious connection. I can't say, but because I don't know. But in other situations, I do see that he inconvenienced himself primarily, and sometimes others, for the sake of that person not feeling hurt, not leaving the spiritual path. And so in that way too, let us just be patient with other people. It doesn't mean we don't speak up if we need to, but has that been working? Has it been resolving things for you? If so, great. If not, maybe try another way. Some people say the definition of insanity is to repeat the same action again and again, expecting a different result. And so he shouts and I shout back. Somehow it doesn't bring peace, but maybe it will this time. Maybe I will shout peace into him this time. And maybe it's time to just take a step back. So, above all, let's offer all these things up to the light in our meditation, in our prayer, in our devotion, in our Kriya practice, to just say, "It's all yours, God. I just want to come home." God bless you.